Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you how to make the teddy bear. And it's going to be in a couple short videos since I don't really know how to make videos to slice them together. Maybe my husband will help. So the first thing you need to have is obviously your pattern. If you don't want to do a teddy bear, you can either hand draw a pattern or you can print one off the internet if you have a printer. You obviously need your thread. You need your pins and your pin cushion and a needle. You need to have something to make. For my teddy bear, I want to make 2 eyes and a nose, and then I'm going to make mouth out of felt there, but I've got 2 buttons for his eyes and then a little pink button for his nose. And then, like I said, I'm going to use the blue felt as his mouth, probably either the blue or the yellow, probably the blue. I'm going to make like a mouth with that. In your pattern for your project, you do have to have at least 2 buttons, and then you have to have 2 pieces of decoration. So I might do his mouth in yellow, and then I think I'm going to do a bow tie in whichever fabric I decide not to make the front of my bear. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to cut everything out and then I'll get back with you. Hey guys, so I'm back. So I went ahead and cut out, I made a little mouth. I'm actually going to do the yellow felt as the mouth because I'm going to do this gray and blue polka dot as the front of my bear. I'm going to do the yellow as the back of my bear. And then I did cut out a square of fabric, and what I'm going to do is just kind of fold this. And then I'm going to stitch it in the middle, and then I'm going to sew it on the front of the bear so he has like a little bow tie on. I also can make it a girl and put a bow here, or a boy that has a bow here. I could put the bow on his foot or its arm, wherever I wanted to. And then, like I said, I'm going to do 2 little clear buttons, or these whitish, milky white, for the eyes, and I'm going to do a little cute pink button nose for the nose of the bear. I wanted to show you, I've cut out the pattern piece and then I've marked where my opening is going to be. So where I'm going to leave, I'm not going to stitch that so that I can stuff it later. But I wanted to show you how I pin it and cut it. So you notice that I didn't cut it out of the middle of my felt. I only did it on the side of my felt because we always want to maximize the usable surface of our fabric, so we don't want to waste fabric. And then I'm going to cut both of these layers at the same time because why not? It saves us 1 step in cutting. The only thing you want to make sure is that it is your fabric and everything is lined up so that you are cutting and you're not missing like a piece of fabric. So I do have some extra of this fabric, so if I wanted to, I can move the felt down just a little bit to make sure that it's on that fabric. And the next thing I need to do is I need to pin my pattern on. So I'm just gonna put 1 pin kind of here in the middle, and then 1 pin on each arm. And remember, we go in through all of our layers. Go in through all of our layers and then back out all of our layers. And you really shouldn't need more than 5 pins on this project. I gave you 5 pins in your sewing kit, so that should be more than enough. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this out. And the first thing I always do is get rid of as much excess fabric as I can. And then I'm just going to put that to the side. So anything we have extra, I'll just put to the side. I don't know if you guys can see those, but some needles threaded. I'm just going to move this real quick so I can see what I'm doing here. All right, so again, I'm just going to cut around my bear here, and I'm cutting through all of my pieces of fabric at the same time. So this is just like if we were cutting out a pattern for a garment. We would pin the pattern to our fabric and then cut out our fabric. You do want to make sure you have some really nice sharp scissors or sewing shears when you're cutting, so that you're getting nice clean cuts. You want to open those scissors or those shears as much as possible. So we're getting nice, clean, smooth cuts. And don't be scared to manipulate the fabric to make it work for you. Especially when we're doing garment fabric, because obviously that's really big fabric. So you want to make sure it works for you when you're cutting it. And then we want to cut right on the edge of the pattern. A lot in sewing is personal preference on how you want to do things. So that is just going to depend on how you're comfortable. So it looks like we didn't get our fabric cut the right way. So I'm going to go back in there and fix that. There we go. It's a little tricky cutting on camera here. I'm trying to tape by myself. I'm trying to get on the camera the best I can here. If you have more pins at home, by all means, use as many pins as you would like. Just remember that those pins are there so that you don't prick yourself or cut yourself. And I am a right-handed, but I cut what people say I cut lefty. So I actually cut on the opposite side of my pattern. It's just what I am comfortable with. I've always done that. I don't know why, but that's how I'm comfortable cutting. All right. Now, if we were making this at like a real pattern on a real garment, we would want to be much more careful about cutting out our edges, but I think we did pretty well here. So I'm going to take my pins off, stick them back in the pin cushion. That's where they belong. And now I should have one piece of felt and then one piece of fabric cut out in our pattern here. And I'm going to put this to the side, but I'm going to remember where I put the opening. So I put the opening on the side of my leg here. You always want to have your opening on the straightest edge that you have, and one that's not going to be so easy recognizable. So we could do it on the inside seam of the leg here. I'm just going to do it on the outside seam because I think it'll be easier to stuff that way. We're going to put that down. Okay, so the next step after you have these cut out, this is the back of my teddy bear, so I'm going to put that to the side and I'm going to work on my front end. So before you put your two pieces together, your front and your back, you need to sew on any of your buttons or any of your decorations that you wanted to do on the front end of your bear. So I'm just going to move this over kind of to the side. Let's make it a little bit easier. Remember when we sew buttons that we use a double strand. So we're going to find our two ends and we're going to knot our two ends together. So we do double strand on any kind of buttons that we put on or any closures on a jacket or a pair of pants or a shirt. You always use two strands, and that's just to make it a little bit stronger and more stable than if we were just using the one strand for hand sewing. It's still going to be strong, but buttons take a lot of wear and tear. You always want to make sure that your knot is big enough that it will not go through the fabric. Okay, so when I do my buttons, I'm just going to lay them out and kind of get an idea of where I want them to lay. Kind of looks like a pig right now. It's looking pretty cute. So I kind of know where I want my buttons to be. You don't want them too close to the edge because remember we're going to be hand sewing this. And then let's see where we're going to end up putting the bow. Yeah, I think I can put the bow in the middle here. So I think that'll be fine. Let's put the bow in there. So I'm going to take this all off so it's safe, and I'm going to keep one of the buttons on there. And I'm going to start sewing on my button. When you do these buttons on this, you don't have to start and stop each one as long as you have enough thread. So you can go from one button to the next, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So you always start on the back side of your fabric with your button. And we go up through one hole and then down through the other. I'm not going to have you guys make a shank, a thread shank on your button, but you could if you wanted to. And up and down. The magic number is typically 5 times. If I was donating this, normally in class we would be making something and donating it. I probably would do even more than that. Depending on the age of the child that is getting my project, because we want to make sure they're really secure in case like a little guy or a little girl gets our project. So we don't want to cause any safety hazards. And you see I've got this like little loop. I don't know if you guys can see that loop in my thread. But if you just kind of tug on your thread a little bit, that should come out. All right, so now that's the front of my first button. You see here's the back of my button. I'm actually just gonna move straight across and go up for my second button. I'm not going to finish off my stitching. So I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna put my second button on. You just have to be careful that you don't pull that first stitch too tight, that it starts to fold your fabric here. So you want it to make sure it stays nice and straight and flat. All right, I'm gonna do one more time just for good measure here. My teddy bears might be up for auction. We'll see how cute they come out. And then I'm gonna do the same thing for the nose. Now I do want the 2 holes this way. So I am gonna just be particular about how I have them laying on the fabric. When I pin it, I don't want them to be crooked. I want them to kind of be straight. And we just go up and then down several times. Now, if you don't like the buttons that you have in your sewing kit that I gave you, I'm sure if you look around the house, you will probably find some random buttons lying around. A lot of our garments come with extra buttons in case we lose them. As long as you're the person that owns that garment doesn't mind, you can borrow those buttons. So I've got my eyes and my nose. Now I'm going to go ahead and I move on to my mouth. And you have several options to sewing on your mouth. We can just whip stitch it around, and I think that's what I'm going to do. You could do like a back stitch just in the middle. You could do a running stitch around it. However you really want to. You just want to make sure that it's in there nice and secure. I actually came up on the wrong side, but I'm just going to do a whip stitch. So I'm just going to stay nice and close to the edge of my fabric. And I'm not going to be really particular on this whip stitch, what it looks like, because I think, you know, the teddy just needs to have some character. So I'm just going to kind of go along and see what happens when I stitch this. And and we're going to call that decoration. That's one of the fun things about hand sewing, is that when we're doing things like this, it's considered embroidery or decoration or decorative stitches. So it's okay if it looks a little funky. And again, I'm just manipulating my fabric around so that it's easier for me to sew, so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'll probably only be able to finish the mouth, and then we'll see, but I might not have enough thread to put on the bow tie. So that's okay if you run out of thread. We just rethread our needle, and we just keep going. So we're almost done here. You do want to just make sure that if you do a mouth or you do eyes or whatever you decide to do as your decorative function, that it is on there securely on your shape. Okay, so there's his little face. Okay, I think I'm good. So I still have a good amount of thread here, so I think I can make it. But I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna bunch up the middle of the fabric here to make it kind of look like a bow tie. And then I'm gonna come up, let's see, I might have to get some new thread, but I'm just gonna come up where I kind of want that to be. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm gonna actually push it through all of these layers of fabric. I'm gonna show you guys a little trick here. This is a trick I learned from making true leading bows. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap that thread around a couple times, nice and tight. It's not so tight, hold on. I wanna make sure I fix this, because if I leave it like that, it's gonna be in the middle of the air. So I need to pull it down tight to the fabric. All right, let's try this again. So I'm gonna wrap it around a bunch of times. And that's gonna keep it bunched up in the middle. And then I'm just gonna go back into my fabric, kind of where I started there, and pull that tight. And I'm gonna go in the back here and I'm gonna knot off. So when we hand sew, we never want to show our knots. We always want our knots to be on the inside. So I'm happy with where my bow is. Like I said, I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna knot off on the back. So however it is easier for you to knot off, I showed you this one in class. It's kind of how my grandmother taught me how to do it. It's kind of the same way on the video. But again, you just want to make sure you have a good knot there that's not going to come out and that's big enough that it's not going to go through the fabric. So I'm going to do it one more time just for good measure here. And then we'll clip off the extra. Okay. The extra thread goes in the trash. The needle goes in the pincushion. So I've got my bow tie, I've got my mouth, and I've got my eyes and my nose. And if you're okay with decorating him like that, him or her, or it, then, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking I might need to tack these down. I'm going to tack these down. So I'm actually going to sew these down so that it stays like this. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start, I'm going to knot just one side because I'm hand sewing, and make myself a pretty good size knot there. Remember, there's lots and lots of ways to make knots. The big thing is that you just make sure it's big enough that it's not going to go through your fabric when you're sewing. And they can be ugly. They don't have to be pretty at this point because they're all going to be inside. So we're not going to see those ugly knots. But I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to tack it down. So what I mean by tack it down is I'm just going to literally go in and just go up one time and then come down one time. And I just put a tack right there, or just one little stitch so that it will stay in place. Then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And I'm just going to do that on all 4 pieces so that it stays open and it lays flat like that, because I think it looks better that way. Put one more in there. I think his name might have to be Dots. We'll see. All right, so now it's gonna stay like that because I put those little stitches in there, and it's gonna hold it down. Oops. When I turned it over, I realized I didn't pull all my thread through. I wanna do that, make sure it's flat. And then again, I'm just gonna put another knot in here. Just put one more knot. And I clip off my thread. So now it looks like that from the back. It looks like this from the front. Hey guys, we're back. So I've got my teddy bear eyes, nose, mouth, his bow tie sewed on. That's the back side. So you see all my knots are hidden in the back. And now what we're gonna do is we're going to attach our front to our back. Usually with hand sewing, we sew our right sides together, but for this assignment, I want you just to put your one piece on top of the other like this. And then we're gonna start sewing. And we're gonna hand stitch. And again, you have your choice if you want to whip stitch it closed, or if you wanna do a running stitch, or if you wanna do a back stitch. I'll show you that on this teddy bear, I did the running stitch, and I think, or the back stitch. And I just really like how it kind of looks like this continual outline of the shape. Oops, I gotta clip my threads. However, it really just depends on how you want to do it. Remember, we call the whip stitch the ugly stitch. So, if you like that stitch, then do it. I'm going to do on this one just the running stitch. But please remember, no matter what stitch you do to close off your teddy bear here, that it has to be small, okay? So tiny little stitches, not these big long stitches, because what's going to happen is our stuffing will fall out. Also remember, we only hand stitch with one thread. So I've got a knot on the bottom of just my one thread, and I have a little tail hanging down here, okay? And again, we're going to start, I'm going to leave, like I said, I'm going to leave this spot open here on the leg. So I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to put my needle in between the two fabrics and go up to the top fabric and bring my knot all the way to it. And then you can start your stitching. That way your needle or your knot is hidden. There's no knot visible. And like I said, we're just gonna make tiny little stitches here. The fun thing about the running stitch is you can make a couple stitches and then pull it through. I really do like the way that the back stitch came out, but just for time purposes here on the video, we're just doing the running stitch here. So it's just up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And if you're really not comfortable with your stitching, then I wouldn't do it how I'm doing. I would just do one at a time. But this is an easy way to do the running stitch. And you can do a couple stitches at the same time here. You, of course, I don't think I said this at the beginning, but you can use any sewing equipment that you have at the house. You don't have to use the stuff that's only in your sewing kit that I gave you. But that was just some stuff for me to get to you. Now, I will tell you, when I get to these corners, I am going to go ahead and go down and then pivot and go back up. That way I have a little bit more control, whoops, over kind of how that corner works. I do the same thing when I backstitch. Oops, and I've already lost my thread. So just a reminder so that you don't lose your thread like I just did. If you hold the eye of the needle in your hand, then you won't lose your stitching. And you also don't want to make really long threads, because what's going to happen is those will knot up and then you're just going to have more problems and you'll get more frustrated. So they say 24 inches or less is a good amount of hand stitching thread to use at one time. I say you use what you're comfortable with. And it's okay, like if you run out and you have to knot off and then you have to rethread and do another thread, that's perfectly fine. You will never really make something with one just continuous strand of thread ever anyway. So good practice for making knots. You see how much faster this stitch is. I think this is probably the fastest stitch, but like I said, if we were going to donate these to little kids, this would not be the best stitch to use, because you could potentially get your stuffing coming out. And we don't want kids choking on stuffing. We don't want you choking on stuffing either, but I think you guys are old enough to know better than to eat stuffing, I hope. And we're just going to go all the way around. Now, obviously, I'm kind of starting to run out of thread here. So the other thing is knowing what's kind of a good stopping point for you with your thread. Remember, you need to have enough thread to make your knot. So you don't want to get to where there's just this tiny little piece of thread that you can't knot. So I'm going to do a couple more stitches here, and then I'm going to knot off this one. Sorry. Trying to stay in the viewing area here. And actually, I think I'm going to just knot off right here behind my bow tie. So we're going to come to the back here, and you're going to make your first knot. And you can take this off the needle. You can do it on the needle however you want, just to make a knot. I'll show you off the needle. You just wrap it around your finger. And then, oh, was it already in there? Nope. Sorry. That's being tricky. Put my finger where I want my knot, pull it. You do have to do a couple knots, because if not, the knot will come right through the fabric. Oh, here's a great, I don't know if I showed you guys this, because we haven't started hand sewing, doing this before hand sewing. If your knot looks like it's going to end up in the middle of the thread, take your needle, put it through the loop, and put your needle down on the fabric, then pull. And it actually will make that knot go down to the bottom. Now, since I have all this other thread, I've got to kind of hide this tail of our thread. So, one second, I'm going to have to cut this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my needle through right here into the middle of the fabric, and then just pull it through. And I'm going to cut some of this because we don't need all that extra. But now the tail is not out on the back side. It's actually on the inside here of your fabric. You could very easily just put your knot on the inside so you could finish on the inside and put your knot on the inside. But that's okay as long as it's not really big and bulky and like really noticeable, because we can see our other stitches anyway. Then I'm just going to pick up again from where I left off. Remember, I'm going to put my knot in between the fabric. So I'm going to start in between the fabric here. Line up my fabric. And then continue to do my running stitch. Now, normally if we were sewing too, we would find thread that would match this gray. But it actually worked out that I had this blue in my sewing kit. And I think it looks good with the fabric, so I'm okay with that. You just use whatever thread you got in your sewing kit that I gave you, or any thread that you have at home to do this. And I'm probably going to have to make one more thread, it looks like. I don't think I'll make it all the way around. Make sure you fix your fabric so that it's lined up correctly. If it looks like it's getting out of the way, then just fix it. We're getting there though. We're almost there. Sorry, it's kind of quiet while I'm doing this, but we're just watching. You can fast forward through this part of the video by all means, if you understand what's happening. All right, I think, oh, I lost my thread, I think. Oh no, it's still there. I think I might actually be able to make it all the way. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually gonna stop sewing, and I'm gonna put my needle in my thing here. You could also just take it out and put it in your pin cushion so the needle's not there. But you're gonna take your little bag of stuffing. Hopefully you didn't put too much of it in your first project. But we're gonna just start stuffing our teddy bear. And so we wanna start, I always start at the head and kind of work my way down. But you're gonna have to really kind of manipulate getting it in there. If you have like a chopstick or a pencil or anything you can use to kind of stuff it in there, you should be able just to use your finger, because it's fabric, so it should move and bend. You don't want to overstuff your project. So if it looks like, you know, the stuffing's gonna bulge out, then maybe we have a little bit too much in there and we just need to take that out. So I'm gonna get it up there in his ears. This is when they really start looking interesting, because they start taking this 3D shape on. Then I'm going to go do his arm. I wait and do like his body, like the middle here, kind of to the last. I do his extremities first, his or her extremities. And try not to stuff like the whole bag of stuffing in at once. Take your time and really use smaller bunches of stuffing. That'll help you really be able to manipulate that stuffing easier. Now I'm going to go into his one leg. Maybe. So I'm going to go down here and do his other leg. I'm going to fill that leg up. There we go. And now I'm going to do his body. I'm going to do this leg last because it has the opening. So I'm going to move into his body. Just kind of move the stuffing around. Make sure you feel like he's good and stuffed. He or she or it is good and stuffed. Remember, you can do any shape. You don't have to do our lovely little bear here, but it's kind of like cute in a scary way. This one definitely looks better than my other one. All right, now I'm gonna rethread my needle. And I'm gonna, whoops, I pulled it too tight. I don't know if you saw what it just did. I pulled it too tight and it pulled his arm. I'm just gonna put this thread back in my needle. All right. If you have too much trouble getting in the eye of the needle, you can just wet it with your saliva or cut it. And I'm just gonna finish doing my running stitch. Now it's gonna be a little bit trickier because now you've got stuffing here on the side, so you're really gonna have to hold it closed until you get that stitch in there, because that stuffing is gonna wanna come out. And then I'm gonna do my last stitch and bring it to the back. And I'm going to knot off here. I'm just showing you how I do it. This is not, this is just how my grandmother taught me a million years ago. Feels like a million years. And I'm going to do one more just for good measure here. That one's kind of in the middle of the air. Let me fix that. It's very important that your knots are close to your fabric. So use your pin or your needle and make it work for you. Then I do have to rethread this. And I'm just gonna, again, put it in through the fabric here and then pull it through. And now I'm gonna cut this extra off and I have no more thread on there. So there's our little, oh, he's a little scary. Here's our little teddy bear and you're all done. So the last thing you have to do is take a picture of the front and a picture of the back and put that in your sewing. So here's my number one. I made him have like little mittens in his mouth and his eyes and nose. This is a button that was my grandmother's in her sewing kit. And then here's number two. So be creative, have fun, and kind of do whatever you want with your teddy bears or your shapes. Hold on one sec. Let me go see if I can find. So here's some other examples that we've done in the past in class. So we had Turkey Tom, because we were sewing during Thanksgiving, and I gave him wings and like let his wings flap. Then we've done shoes. So here's my boot. This is supposed to be a sneaker. High heel. Another like boot kind of thing. So have fun with your shapes. But by all means, teddy bear's fine. I gave you that shape because I thought it was probably one of the easier shapes to do, but challenge yourself on this, have fun, and then don't forget to take your pictures. Can't wait to see them. Bye.